What's up, family? What's up? What's up? What's up? B. Sean Riley here, and welcome to Spiritual Shift. Spiritual Shift it's really like uh, a sanctuary, like a special place where people that are seekers. I'm just gonna read my notes here. Really, people that are seekers of truth, and where they can come and discuss like deep and important spiritual questions that they may have and get resources, find answers, but most of all, engage with a community that is non judgmental, non confrontational, loving, accepting, and of a like mind. That's really what spiritual shift is about. These talks, they're just spiritual shift is really going to be just a series of just conversations that I'm going to be having. Um, Sometimes I may bring in resources, slides, or just extra pictures, or all kinds of stuff that may accentuate, may drive a point home, or maybe explain something in a different way. But let me tell you actually why I decided to start doing this these videos called Spiritual Shift. It took me a minute. It took me a minute to actually really decide to do it. And then even when I decided to do it, it took me another several months, maybe even almost a year to actually sit down and actually do it. Sit down and actually do it. Mainly because I'm super, super, super extra, ultra, uber um private. Just super private. So it took me a lot to actually decide to go ahead and do it. I wanted to do it, and when I decided to do it, then it took me a second to actually get my thoughts together, get some concepts together, how I wanted to start presenting some material, and then to just do it. So, um, spiritual shift, like why spiritual shift? So, just a little bit about my background in this realm of religion and like spirituality. Um, so the reason why I decided to do this, so I have had a quote unquote calling, um, this infamous, mysterious calling that people say that they have, people that usually go into Christian ministry or become a pastor or evangelist, all that stuff. I've had that all my life since as far back as I can remember, like like 6 years old, 7 years old, 8 years old. I actually grew up in a very, very, um, actually pretty amazing church, pretty amazing denomination. I guarantee you probably never heard of it. I'm not gonna tell you what it is because I'm gonna have some fun with it as I make these videos. I already know you've never heard of it, but it has thousands and thousands of churches all over the country, the U.S., Caribbean, Europe. Very fundamental, very conservative, evangelical Christian denomination. Um, so I'm gonna just leave it at that because I don't want to say what it is because like I said, I guarantee you've never really heard of it, but it's pretty big. Like I said, there's tens and thousands and thousands and thousands of congregations of this denomination around the world, and I just happened to grow up in one of them. In a big city in Chicago on the west side. Um, I'm not from the west side, but the church where I went to was on the west side, like deep, deep on the west side of Chicago. Um, and it was for the most part, it was an amazing experience. It was an amazing experience. I mean, uh, through, like I said, I've been going to this church from a child all the way up through adulthood. And it was like I said, it was very unique. It wasn't like Baptist or Methodist or like some of the normal church kind of environments that you would think. But it wasn't like we didn't have some big choir. It was like always, we had no choir. We had a choir, but it wasn't like we was, you know, doing all the known choir stuff that, churches are known to do. What we did have though, this is, this is what sets us apart from a lot of other churches, is that we had a this camp in Michigan that there was about 6, 7, 8, maybe 10 churches in Chicago, in Detroit, maybe another city, I can't remember, but definitely the main churches were in Chicago and Detroit, and they owned this land in Michigan, and they had a camp, and you know, it was about 100 acres of land, had a big lake on the camp, had cabins, um, had all kind of activities, swimming, boating, pontooning, water skiing. I mean, anything that you could do on a lake, we was doing it. Had a beach, um, all kind of hiking, horseback ride. I mean, it was a camp. It was a camp, and it was beautiful. So I grew up going to this camp and learning about the Bible, and learning about Jesus, and learning the stories, and it was amazing for me. It was really amazing for me growing up. I don't regret it. I don't. Um, I don't. It was for me. It was probably one of the things that formed me and that helped me get through childhood, get through teen, young adult, going to college. That foundation was just instrumental for me. But let me go back. So from a child, I knew that I was I was really different than most other kids. I was different than most people, period. One of the things is that when I was in Michigan, when we would spend, I personally would spend a lot of time in at the camp because mostly we would the camp would bring kids from the cities, Detroit, Chicago, Wisconsin, Ohio, like all over the place, and they would bust these kids in from the inner city, from these other cities, and they would have weeks. They would have each group would have a week at camp, and then another group would come in the next week, and then the next week, and then the next week. So over the course of a summer, there would be 10, sometimes 12 groups of kids from all over the Midwest coming to this camp. My, fortunately, unfortunately, my parents were, in particular, my mom was one of the directors of this camp. So I would be up there a lot. Sometimes I would be up there for the whole summer. But it was love. It was fun. So it wasn't, you know, um, my friend group, my peer group that I grew up with, some of us are still friends today, you know, um, all came from that experience. But one of the things that separated me from a lot of the other kids that I never really talked about is that I used to have really powerful experiences at that camp because it was in Michigan. If you know anything about Michigan, it's lots of nature. Like it's nature. Like we was away from the city. We weren't in the city. And this was a long time ago. This was this was a few years ago. This was decades ago. No cell phones, no internet. So it was so there wasn't really any technology to distract us from being in nature, being around other kids, other adults, um, really getting into a spirit um, of God and understanding Christianity and what it was about and how to really live for the Lord and all this kind of stuff. So this is kind of how I grew up, and like I said, it was wonderful. But I would have these really really interesting experiences because like I said, it was 100 acres. If you have a sense, if you have a sense of what 100 acres is, when I would walk around from different parts of the property, go from the cabins to the lake to the where we had apple orchards, or where we had the tennis courts, or where we had the basketball courts. I mean, where we had the sand dunes. It was a lot of space. So a lot of times when I would be walking, sometimes early in the morning, sometimes late at night, sometimes in the middle of the day, I would be walking in woods, trees, and all this kind of stuff. And I would literally feel like a presence with me, like walking with me. So I'm going to and fro. And it would be like, is someone watching me? But it was very, it wasn't scary. It wasn't like I was, like, oh my God, something's gonna, and it wasn't like that. It was very peaceful. It was very loving. It was very, and I had this for years growing up. So that was one thing. The other thing, I could go more into it, but I'm not gonna do that right now. Go into some of those experiences. I'm not gonna do that right now. But the other thing is that like I said, I had these this intuition. I knew that I had this calling on my life to do something related to Christianity. I knew that, since I was a Christian, I was being raised as a Christian. I was like, okay, I'm gonna do something with this, because I was very I knew how to explain the Bible way older than, like, I would be asking my Sunday school teacher or my Bible study teacher. I would be asking them questions that they'd be like, I don't really know about that. And I'm 10. I'm like 8, 9, 10 years old. So it seemed to me that I was somewhat ahead of my years when it came to all those kinds of things. So I'm gonna skip a whole bunch of stuff. Um, Fast forward all the way to, past my teen years, past my undergraduate education. I ended up going to seminary um, here in Chicago, to an amazing school on the campus of Northwestern. Got an MDiv, um, but in the middle of my graduate degree, um, I began to really dig. If you know anything about the process of seminary and what you do, you really get into the languages of the Bible, Old Testament, New Testament. Get into the language. You get into kind of like what's going on, um, what the context is, what the history is. And so as I was doing this, like, my head was kind of like, it wasn't exploding. Some of my peers at the time were kind of losing it, because it was, you're digging into the scriptures and you're kind of tearing the scriptures apart, sort of kind of way, not in a negative way, because the seminary that I went to was the United Methodist Seminary. So they had churches all over the world, thousands of churches all over, hundreds in Chicago, all over the country, all over the world. So they were in the business of preparing people to be pastors and to go into parish ministry. So they weren't trying to debunk the Bible. They weren't trying to overthrow their own denomination, but their approach to understanding the Bible was very um straightforward. Some people call it liberal. So their approach, it shook a lot of people. I had friends that really had nervous breakdowns. They, you know, they unenrolled from school and went to, like, more conservatively positioned seminaries. I didn't. Uh, I was excited about the things that I was learning about Christianity, about the Bible, about Jesus, about the whole theological framework from which Christianity was derived, and it empowered me. It gave me way more understanding of what I had studied and learned in church all of my life. So I basically devoured the whole process. Traveled. around the world in grad school, studying different cultures and how they looked at different things. And when I emerged from seminary, in good faith, I couldn't, because I was positioning myself to be a pastor, to go into church ministry, and to start a church. And granted, this was years ago. This was years ago. Let me just say that it was it was years and years and years and years ago. I'll just keep it at that. Um, but in good faith, I just couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. I was just like, there's so many more questions that I have. There's so many more things that I want to understand about Christianity, about the 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 concepts, that I decided to walk away from, Christianity and that mission of becoming a pastor. And um, for a minute, it wasn't really that difficult. The most difficult thing is that I had just spent like 60 racks on grad school, and telling my mother that, yeah, about that, about that being a pastor thing. So that was really the hardest thing for me, was like telling my mom. And my my one of my siblings, who is a pastor now, that, yeah, I'm gonna have to do some more research. I can't really do that right now. So that is, I wanted to go through that, and that's just like the super super fast version, because I don't want to spend the whole session that we have today on that. I wanted to give you just a little bit of background on myself, just on where I'm coming from. I've spent probably the last 20 years, easy, like heavy, studying Christianity as well, because I didn't really stop studying Christianity in the Bible. I loved the Bible growing up. I still do love the Bible. I still love the story of Jesus. It was very foundational and instrumental to me. Um, but I began to really connect the dots to the biblical text and really dig deeper into what people were saying about the Bible, like what I had grown up to know. And I was like, that's not really, like, when I'm reading it, I'm looking at it, that's not really what it says. Like, technically, that is not really what is being said. So after many, many years of doing that, as well as um, traveling around the world, looking at different religions, looking at how this whole thing is put together, um, I was like, after it didn't even take me 20 years. It didn't even take me 20. It took me about 10 years to really look at it and say, yeah, this is a totally different picture than what is being presented. Like, what's actually happening, what's going on here in the Bible, and then how the Bible connects and relates to other faiths and religions is not really what's being presented. It's just not. So it took me about 10 years to get to that point. And then it took me another probably 10 years to figure out what I was going to do with all that information. It was like, what am I going to do with this? Like, I don't really, like, for me, I was charged. I was like, oh man, this is, constantly learning, constantly, discovering new things. Like, I really did, I discovered a big piece of the concept of the soul, and really what the soul is, and what we're supposed to be doing with our soul, probably about 3 years ago. You know what I'm saying? It was just like, oh my God, this is crazy. This is amazing. Um, in how the soul fits into the whole picture. So, but like I said, that I took that last 10 years, I was just like, what am I gonna really, like, how am I gonna explain this to people? Like, I didn't really have a big need or desire to, because it's like, I got the information, I'm cool with it, I understand it. I don't know everything. I'm not gonna come off or come out like I'm like the all-knowing. I do know some things, but one of the biggest thing that I know is that I don't really know anything. That's probably the biggest thing. But I do know some things, and I have positioned my life and structured my life in a way that the things that I do know, I now am like, this is how you build a life now. This is how you build a spiritual life. This is really what we're supposed to be doing here. This is really what Christianity is about. This is what Islam is about. This is what Judaism is about. This is what, Buddhism is about. This is what Hinduism is about. This is what spirituality is about. It's all about the same thing. Um, and then let me just say this real quick is that, my mother grew up as a Ahmadiyya Muslim. So I could actually have grown up Muslim. It just so happens that she converted to Christianity when she was in college. All of my cousins, my aunts, they all are Muslim. You know what I'm saying? So, like I said, my grandfather, was an Ahmadiyya Muslim, not black Muslim, not, you know, he was, Ahmadiyya Muslim is a very large sect of Islam all over the world in, probably every country, you know, on the planet. So that's a whole nother story that I have a pretty strong Muslim Islamic strand in my family. But that's something for another day, another session, another talk. Just the whole because I'm deeply engaged um in understanding more and more about Islam, not from a religious perspective, but from this what I was just saying. It's all saying the same message if you really dig down into it. So with all of that, my people, my brothers and sisters, fam, I wanted to just talk about just a couple things before I get off of here. In that, I'm going to look at some notes here, so forgive me for turning away from you guys. Um, so one of the things that I preach and teach is that if you think that Christianity, if there's more to the story, there is so much more to the story. There's so much more to the story you can't even imagine. Um, this is how I explain it. Like Christianity, what we're taught is like it's just a pebble on a beach, on an ocean. It's just one little grain of sand. The story is all of the sand on the beach and the whole world. That's how big the story is. That's how big the story is. And we just got one little sand. So I don't I don't preach, oh, you need to leave Christianity, oh, you need to, Christianity is wrong, No, I don't preach that. No. If you're in Christianity and you are satisfied and you are, hey, it's working for you, you know, hallelujah, go forth in your Christianity. However, if you think that there's more to the story, and this is kind of where I was in when I went to seminary, I was like, there's more to the story. There's something that's not, I was really digging for answers and truth and understanding and wisdom. I wasn't really like my goal wasn't it was to be a pastor, but my goal was truth and wisdom and knowledge and understanding and like what is this all about? Okay, I got to be a pastor to really talk about this stuff. But my ultimate goal was to really knowledge and wisdom and understanding and truth. So that's why when I got a hold of some real truth and some real understanding of what this was about, I was like, yeah, I gotta go pursue truth. So one of the things that I have a couple notes here that I just want to drop on you guys for a quick second is that um, there's a lot of there's a lot of things that were taken out of the Bible. Um, and I'm just going to go through some of these. So just historically, during the time of Christ, there was a lot of religiousness going on during the time. What history tells us is that Rome was the power in the world at the time. And there were, just to give you some, there was Mithraism, and Mithraism was huge. And if you just Google Mithraism, and that's Mythraism, again, Mythraism, Mithraism. Mithra was the god. And you tap into Mithraism and just Google it and just read some stuff, and you're gonna be like, what? I'm not gonna go into it right now because I want to go ahead and get through some other stuff. But Mithraism was huge during right before the quote unquote time of Christ, right before that. Gnosticism was really big. Of course, the Sadducees and the Pharisees, they get some attention in the Gospels. And then there was this group called the Essenes. So these are just a few of the things that were flying around during that time. So the reason I'm saying that is that Christianity didn't come like just out of nowhere. Like it just dropped down from heaven on a saucer, on a plate. And next thing you know, Jesus is like, you know, covered through with the gospel. That's not really how it happened. So the other thing is that uh, 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 um so yeah, I just want to say, the so the Bible that we study and that we worship, not really worship, but that we esteem, it didn't really happen like people say that it did. Um, Without going to too much into technicalities and technical stuff, um, there were a lot of what was going on is that, okay, there was no internet, all right, there was no phones. So when how people communicated a lot of stuff was on these things called parchments. All right, you've seen the scrolls. So they would write all this stuff down. All right, and then um, this is how they moved ideas and information around. So there was a lot of these parchments talking about all kinds of stuff. Okay, when it comes to religious thoughts and theological stuff, a lot of stuff. All right. So when I mentioned all of the different religious, spiritual kinds of things that were going on, like the Gnostics, um, the Essenes. You had like all of these different spiritual ideas, Gnosticism, Mithraism. So they had writings, and they were writing stuff and talking about stuff like all over the place. So one other thing that Christianity doesn't really talk about a lot at all, actually, is just the geopolitical nature of religion. Religion is very, very political. It's political today. So back then, there was no separation of church and state. We don't really have a concept of what that is. The law was the religious law. That's what it is. Um, the only people that sorta have an idea of what it is some Islamic nations. They have it's tip of mind. It's something. It's a particular law that they have. Their religious law is the law. Okay, Jews, they don't really rock like that. They have a separate law, civil law, that kind of takes precedence in the day-to-day activities of people. But like back a couple thousand years ago, like the time period that we're talking about, The religious law, that was the law for the area in the, where Jesus was supposedly moving around and hanging around. The religious law was the law. Okay. So, and that's for, the people that follow these religions. Okay. It wasn't necessarily that way for Rome. Rome had its own law. But the thing is that religion was so powerful that Rome knew that it had to have a religion. And Rome did have a religion. It was Mithraism. So that's what I'm saying. People don't really understand the geopolitical nature of religion and the fact that Mithraism was sort of kind of the undercover subcurrent religion of Rome. And if you look at Mithraism, it's I'm not gonna tell. I'm gonna go to Google and look it up for yourself, and then just read some stuff on the concepts and the tenets of Mithraism. Then, so you have this figure named Jesus who comes along and is preaching this tenets, preaching this stuff, and gets popular, gets really big, starts moving around, shaking around. It causes a political stir. Okay, it causes a problem for the powers that be. So what are they going to do about it? Okay, what are they going to do about it? So what ends up happening is that this Roman emperor called Constantine, he's like, well, this Christianity stuff is getting pretty big. What are we going to do? We got to do something. So long story short, Constantine makes Christianity the state religion of Rome. So now Christianity, Rome merge. Okay. I'm going through this pretty fast so that I can get through this quick. So now, once you have it merged, so Rome is really more interested in using this faith to serve its purposes, all right, which is whatever the purposes of an empire is, right? We are, if you don't know, go do some research and you figure that out. So now, how do we get people to follow this religion? Okay, so we have to have some type of law, some type of official document. So this is where the Bible comes in. Okay, so the Bible then, like, so I already told you guys that there was lots of religions, lots of thoughts, theological things going on, lots of spiritual sects, lots of different groupings of people that had their own ideas about everything. Okay. So how was Rome going to get control of all this so that it could use Christianity to build its empire? All right. So that's where the Bible comes in. So let me just mention some of the books that did not make it into the Bible. And I'm just flying through this. I know I'm like flying through this stuff. I'm just looking at my lunch. So um, you have the Book of Enoch. And I may have to do a part two to this. You have the Book of Enoch. You have the Apocrypha. Um, you have, which is the Apocrypha was a whole bunch of different scrolls that people that wrote down history and stories and all kinds of stuff. You had, I'm just going to my notes here. Like I said, you had the Book of Enoch. Um, you have the Enuma Elish, um, which was a huge it part of where we get our creation story from came from the Enuma Elish. You also have the Epic of Atrahasis. These are all things that were floating around during this time, the book we were talking about. These are all ancient holy manuscripts, scrolls, writings. You have the Book of Hermes, you have the 42 Laws of Ma'at, you have the Egyptian Book of the Dead, you have the Bhagavad Gita, which is the Bhagavad Gita is so ancient. So you have, all of these, and those are just a few that I named. I could name tons more, but I'm trying to keep this short. So you have all of these scrolls that are floating around. So what ends up happening is that the Roman Empire takes all of this information over years of meetings, having these conferences, what are we going to put in here? What are we going to take out? How are we going to? And what they did is that they gathered all of this and created a version that pretty much they wanted to use to push their philosophy and their understanding of what they believe Christianity to be. So I'm gonna actually end it there. And I'm gonna probably do a part 2 to this, the books of the Bible that were kind of left out of the Bible and why they were left out of the Bible. I'm gonna go deeper into this. I wanted to just use this first, spiritual shift session to just again introduce myself, be Sean Riley, give you a background about me, and that I think it was time for me to really just start talking about some things that I don't really hear a lot of people talking about when it comes to spirituality and Christianity, and like really what it's all about, and what moving forward, what I think, what I feel, people that are looking to grow spiritually, whether you're Christian, Muslim, a Jew, it doesn't really matter actually. Some things that we should be doing to grow spiritually. So with that said, I hope I didn't bore you guys too much. And until next time, this is B. Sean Riley, the Spiritual Shift. And just remember, love is the way. All right. Peace.